This one's going to be a long one, so I'm going to show you the plan up front so you can skip to the parts of the video that you're interested in. 1, I'm going to introduce you to Qwen Image and give you a background. 2, going to show you the ComfyUI setup. 3, going to show you how to integrate it with SillyTavern. 4, going to review the model itself, give you some general thoughts. Then I'm going to go over Qwen Image Edit, which is a different image-to-image model instead of text-to-image. Then we're going to do Krita Integration, and then I'll give you final thoughts on Qwen Image Edit. So, Qwen Image and Qwen Image Edit are new models that have come out in the past couple months. And if you're like me, you hear the name Qwen and you think large language models, not necessarily image generation. But Qwen has applied their expertise in large language models as well as computer vision to create a new language model that is capable of comprehensive text rendering, and an image editing model that is capable of making precise selections and edits based on regular language instructions. So are these models worth using today? And perhaps more importantly, do they have a potential future? The short answer to that is yes, I think they have potential, but that potential has not yet been fully realized. But since these are open source models, they can be fine-tuned. But the big question is, will anybody bother fine-tuning it because it's such a large model? It took over a year for the competitor Flux to get a reasonably uncensored fine-tune called Chroma. And the most recent model, Qwen Image Edit 2509, is not even a month old, so I think the jury is still out on this one. But with that said, let's take a look at what Qwen can do for us today. Let's start with Qwen Image. The model itself was released in August 2025, but the story really starts back in January with Qwen's 2.5 VL large language model. This is a model with computer vision applications, and this model's ability to relate text and images becomes part of the design of the Qwen Image model. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at ComfyUI's template workflow for Qwen Image text-to-image. If we look here at the clip, which is what processes your text prompt, we see Qwen 2.5 VL. That's right, the clip that processes your prompt is straight up a 7 billion parameter large language model. And if I just run this model in an LLM server like Cobalt CPP, you can actually talk to it like any standard large language model. And this is an entirely different beast from older technologies like Stable Diffusion, where the clip really doesn't have any natural language abilities. It's basically processing plain text into tokens, which is why Stable Diffusion XL prompts are really just comma-delimited lists of visual attributes. This lends itself well to training on datasets like Dambaroo, which are nothing more than a collection of tags. But if you want something more, like the concept that somebody is standing on the left with a red shirt, you're going to need a more comprehensive understanding of how text corresponds to an image. And that's going to cost you, because just the clip that processes your text prompt needs like over 10 gigabytes of VRAM. And that's just the conditioning before the main model processes the image. I don't even know how much VRAM the main model uses, but the file size is over 40 gigabytes. But before you despair and say, there's no way I can actually run this at home, that's just the main uncompressed model for training purposes. There are smaller quantizations that you can run on your machine. I got this thing working on an AMD card with 16 gigabytes of VRAM. I know for a fact that it'll work on 12 gigabytes or less, and I've seen reports that it works on as little as 6 gigabytes, with the caveat being that you can make size-quality trade-offs and less capable machines take more time to generate images. So, in my opinion, if your machine has less than 12 gigabytes of VRAM, you're going to have a bad time. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the ComfyUI setup. This is nothing special. All you have to do is search for Qwen in the templates. Just look for Qwen Image text-to-image. Ignore the suggested models to download for now because we're going to be finding different ones. And you're going to need to install an extension that lets you load GGUF models. You have a couple options, but I'm using multi-GPU. Go ahead and get the VAE that is suggested in this workflow, but instead of the model and clip, we're going to download GGUF versions, which you can just find by searching the name of the model, but I'll go ahead and leave links in the description. Alternatively, you can take a look at the GGUF template, and it has links to the models that you should be looking for. In fact, if you like, you can just copy these nodes from the GGUF workflow and paste them into the other one. Or you could just use the GGUF workflow. They're not much different. The only difference here is this optional Lightning 8 steps LoRa, which really does cut down on the generation time. But at any rate, once you've got your models downloaded and your nodes set up, just give it a go and see if it works. If you run out of memory, you may have to adjust your virtual VRAM or find a smaller quantization. But assuming everything works, just give it a run and sit back and relax and maybe do something else because it's going to take a while. And this is the part where I tell you your mileage may vary because I can only tell you what happens on my machine. I've got an AMD 6800 XT. It's no slouch of a card, but AMD has never been that great for AI stuff. Oftentimes, things run slower. They use more VRAM than they would on an NVIDIA machine. But I'm just happy that this works at all because my system seems to be held together with duct tape and superglue, and I'm just counting my blessings right now. But anyway, once you run it and you wait a while, you'll see an image that looks like this. And if you're interested in waiting half as long, which is still a ridiculously long time if you ask me, enable this Lightning 8 steps LoRa. It reduces the image quality, but for what I'm about to do, I'm more interested in getting a fast result. So I'm going to go ahead and enable that now. Now, all I have to do is set the steps to 8 and the config to 1. That's not a requirement, just a suggestion. And I'm going to go ahead and run it again and make sure that it works. And of course, I'm still going to fast forward through this part because it still takes a few minutes to do it. But once all that's done, I'm going to go ahead and export this workflow because I want to get it working in SillyTavern. And to do that, I have to export as API. And that just takes the form of a JSON file that we can import using the image generation extension. By the way, this is a good time to mention that SillyTavern's official documentation is fantastic. So if you ever want to know how to do something, look up the docs first. But anyway, in SillyTavern, all you have to do is make a new Comfy workflow, copy-paste the contents of that exported file, and then comb through it and find some of the parts where we have some template keywords to put in. In this case, the most important thing is %prompt%. You probably also want to do stuff like the image width and height and the number of steps and stuff like that. But at bare minimum, you'll need the prompt, and you'll also want to configure the prompt template. The prompt template is how we instruct the LLM to respond to our request to generate an image. In this case, I've gave it a simple instruction. I said, pause roleplay and write a paragraph describing characters' visual attributes in the current situation. Be descriptive about physical appearance such as eye color, hair color, and clothes, and provide a description of what the character is doing. Pretty straightforward. There's no such thing as a prompt template that works for every model, so you're just going to have to figure it out for yourself which one works best for you. And with all that configured, all we have to do is ask it to generate an image. If you don't see the option to generate an image here, you're probably not connected to the ComfyUI server. I've also enabled the option to edit the prompt before it sends it off to image generation. I'm not actually going to edit it. I'm just using this to take a sneak peek at what the LLM provided as a prompt. We can see that it did what I asked. This is a role-playing model, so it has a pretty flowery description of the character. But while this would kind of be a garbage prompt for Stable Diffusion XL, this is actually exactly what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and send it off to the image generator. And while we're waiting on that to complete, you may be wondering why it's even possible that I can run an LLM and ComfyUI at the same time. And the answer to that is, well, I'm not. I'm actually using another machine as the LLM server. That one's got 12 gigabytes of VRAM. It's a little bit less feasible to run stuff on it, but I can do LLMs just fine with it. But our 8-step image generation has now completed, and we can take a look at what we got. Honestly, it's not that bad. The style looks a little bit weird, but I know how to fix it. We're going to go back to the prompt templates, and I'm going to add a universal positive prompt. Nothing fancy. I'm just going to tell it to look like a retro 1980s anime. And we're going to give that another shot. We can see that the LLM provided another prompt for it, slightly different, but still in the same vein. Go ahead and send it off and wait a minute. Let's fast forward through the boring part and take a look at what we got. As you can see, a very simple instruction to change the style has made a world of difference. And I think it looks pretty good, but there are two main problems. First of all, Qwen image is pretty censored, so if you want to enjoy your spicy role play, this is really not the model for you. If you want something completely uncensored, try Chroma. It's a community-driven fine-tune of Flux, and it's pretty good. But perhaps the bigger problem is image generation time. It just takes forever to generate an image, and I can't see myself using this while in the middle of a role-play scenario. You'd only want to generate an image when you're taking a bathroom break or something. So unless you have a much more beefier machine than me, I'm going to rule this one out as unfeasible, infeasible, unfeasible, whatever. It's not going to work. All right, 11 minutes in, and it's about time we get to the main model review. So is it any good, and should you use it? I think if you're looking for that uncensored experience where you want to generate just crazy stuff, this one's not for you. There are some attempts at uncensored LoRa's, style LoRa's, stuff like that, but in general, I think we have to wait for a fine tune to emerge before we get a really smooth experience with that. We've seen this over and over again, going all the way back to Stable Diffusion 1.5. The base model is a good starting point, but things really come into their own when the community takes over and starts making fine tunes. This is especially prominent when you're looking for a specific style or aesthetic. For instance, I can ask it to render in the style of retro 1980s anime, and it'll give me something. By the way, there is a perceptible quality difference between the image on the left with the Lightning 8 steps LoRa and the image on the right using standard 40 steps without the LoRa. But in either case, compare these to a modern anime fine-tune of Stable Diffusion XL. While SDXL has technological limitations, like it can't put that text on the t-shirt, these fine-tunes, along with specific style LoRa's, have a way more polished look to them. But of course, SDXL benefits from 2 years of fine-tuning, and Qwen image is only a couple months old. So I think it's only natural that we would see results like this. Now, one application would be to use Qwen image to generate the initial composition, and then pass that off to SDXL to refine the look of it. Just keeping in mind that XL doesn't have any native text comprehension. Any text that it can render is kind of an accident. But stylistic shortcomings aside, I think this is still pretty useful for generating certain pieces of spot art, maybe good for a YouTube thumbnail, stuff like that. And I think it's pretty accessible. There's no need to learn prompt foo and keep track of a tag database and anything like that. You just tell it what you want in plain English and it does it. That's not to say that it's perfect. It definitely messes up on text sometimes. It's especially true if you're using shortcuts like the Lightning 8 steps LoRa. So if you think you're going to be saving some time by cutting down on the number of steps, you might still have to re-roll the image, and you've just lost all your time savings at that point. So yeah, for specific compositions, or if you just want to render something like a Coca-Cola can, this model will work just fine. But don't expect it to be a replacement for your favorite uncensored model, at least at this time. And I think that's about all I have to say for this model. To round it out, I will show you a small gallery of some of the images that I've generated, just to give you an idea of what it can do. Now, let's talk about something that's a little bit more interesting in my opinion, and that's Qwen Image Edit. If you're familiar with AI image generation, the usual way to edit images is to run a text-to-image model in image-to-image mode. And if you want to select certain portions of the image, you can use various control map methods or in-painting. But Qwen Image Edit dispenses with this notion and uses more advanced computer vision techniques built into the model to make more advanced edits. Since it has semantic understanding of what things like hair and clothes are, it can make precise selections and edit just that section of the image without any user intervention. Now, in my opinion, this is a potential game changer. Imagine trying to remove the text from a section of the image. Instead of creating a selection mask for in-painting and then worrying about which kind of denoising level to feed into the image-to-image model and potentially doing a rough paint-out to help the model before processing the image, just tell the model in plain English to remove the text, and it does it. It's about time that open models have finally reached that level of accessibility. I'm pretty sure proprietary stuff like Photoshop can already do this. So unlocking this capability for an open source image editor like Krita makes things very interesting indeed. So let's take a look at how to set this thing up and get it working in Krita. You're going to need ComfyUI and you're going to need the Krita AI Diffusion plugin. Fortunately, the maintainers of Krita Diffusion have added native support for Qwen Image Edit, so you don't really have to do much aside from get the appropriate models downloaded. Let's get started by getting just ComfyUI working first, and then we'll move on to Krita. This is a very easy setup. All you have to do is look for the template workflow Qwen Image Edit 2509. Go ahead and download all the models that it suggests to download, the clip and the VIE, except for the main model, and we're going to be replacing that with GGUF. You'll find the model easily enough if you do a web search, but I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description for your convenience. Once you have everything downloaded, replace that main model loader with a GGUF loader. I'm using multi-GPU, and that's it. You're good to go. Give it a test, make sure it works. And while that's going, let me go ahead and give you a rundown on the system requirements. Now, I tried getting this working on my smaller machine, the one with 12 gigabytes of VRAM and 32 gigabytes of RAM, and I did get it working just barely. And I really mean barely because this workflow uses a lot of RAM. And even though I was able to find a GGUF quantization that was small enough, a 3-bit quantization, which is actually quite small, my poor little system with 32 gigabytes of RAM was really struggling. And sometimes it would just run out of memory. Then I profiled this on my larger machine, and for sure, this thing uses at least 26 gigabytes of RAM, and in some cases, over 32. So I strongly suggest a system with 64 gigabytes or more of RAM, and a GPU with at least 12 gigabytes of VRAM, preferably 16 or more. Again, your mileage may vary. I'm on an AMD Linux system where things are always a little bit weird. But once you've demonstrated that this works, you can go ahead and move on to Krita. Installing the plugin is pretty straightforward. Just follow the instructions on the GitHub page. And in ComfyUI, make sure you install the required custom nodes and have the minimum required models downloaded. And just a note for anybody on Python 3.13, there is one custom node called ComfyUI ControlNet Aux that has a dependency on MediaPipe, which does not support Python 3.13. And if you can't install this node, then the Krita plugin will not want to connect to your ComfyUI server. However, there is a bypass. In the settings.json file, all you have to do is find the check server resources key and set that to false. We can get away with this because the Qwen Image Edit workflow does not actually need this node. You will, however, have to install all the other required nodes and models. So once you have everything set up and you can connect to the ComfyUI server, we're going to create a new custom workflow in Krita. And to do that, we just look at the plugin settings, look at the style presets, and create a new style. Now, the plugin already recognizes Qwen models, so when I select this Qwen Edit model, it already knows what to do with this and applies a Qwen Edit Plus workflow. Now, we're also going to add a LoRa. This is the lightning 4-steps LoRa that was specified in the ComfyUI workflow earlier. And we're going to get rid of any preset positive and negative prompts. And lastly, we're going to modify the sampler settings. we're going to select Flux, Oil, or Simple. This is all just copied from the template ComfyUI workflow, and we're going to set sampler steps to 4. This is because we're using the Lightning 4 steps LoRa, of course, and then after that, we're done. You can configure the performance preset if you use live mode, but I'll leave that to you. Then we'll load up an image and give it a spin. I'm going to show the ComfyUI console as it's running. You probably want to take a look at this the first time you run it, just in case anything goes wrong. But assuming everything works correctly, that's pretty much all you have to know. Like I said before, you won't need advanced workflows like ControlNet. Probably the most you'll be doing is making a new selection into a layer and then making Qwen Edit process that layer. But now that you know how to get it working, I will leave the rest to you. But with all that set up out of the way, let's talk about the model itself. What can it do, and is it any good? The Qwen team made a pretty good write-up. I recommend looking at that to get an idea of what it can do. But in short, you can ask it to do anything you want, and it'll do it with varying levels of success. For instance, it's pretty good at recoloring clothes and removing text. And it's pretty good at replacing text with text of a similar style. It's kind of okay at replacing some things in the image with other things that don't exist. Just don't set your expectations unrealistically high. But if you're looking for a quick edit, like for a meme or something, it can get the job done. And it unlocks some possibilities for an image-to-video workflow. My favorite application is to get it to clean up the image, like removing and modifying text. It's basically the same thing as content-aware fill or generative fill. There have been various iterations over the years on this basic concept. I just like the fact that I can tell it in plain human language, hey, clean up this thing, and it'll do it. In fact, I've already used this in a real-life scenario. I have another small channel where I make VTuber clips, and for the thumbnail, I just use a screenshot of the clip. The problem is that often the chat dialog boxes are in the screenshot, and I don't want that showing up in the thumbnail because it just kind of clutters it up. So I just ask Qwen to remove the chat boxes, and it does it. It's something that doesn't have to be perfect, so it's perfectly in line with something that I needed to do. So yeah, I'm using AI assistants to make YouTube thumbnails, just not in the way most people think. But all that stuff is just scratching the surface. It can do multi-image synthesis. In this example from their blog, they say, take these two people and put them in this location. And it synthesizes a new image with a new situation. You want to have your model hold a new necklace and a new handbag? Yeah, no problem. You know those scam websites that try to sell you stuff based on AI-generated images? Well, I guarantee they're going to be using this stuff for their promo images. The possibilities are endless for this, although maybe if you're going to be using this mode, don't use the Lightning 4 steps LoRa. Remember, Lightning stuff is a trade-off of quality for time. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff this thing can do. And the fact that it can run on consumer hardware, just a high-end gaming machine, is a huge deal. Can Adobe, Grok, and ChatGPT do this? Yeah, probably. But now you can do it too locally. And you know what? All this stuff was built on Qwen 2.5. And now that Qwen 3 is out, this stuff is just going to keep improving in the future. So even if you're not interested in using this stuff today, keep an eye on it. And the next time you see some crazy feature being touted by a proprietary model like OpenAI, remember that open models with the same capability are sure to follow if they haven't been done already. But that's going to do it for this video. If you give these models a try, let me know what you think. But as always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.